Hi, Alex. Yes, very well. And first, I would like to know how are you dealing with the COVID-19 situation at the moment?
Very, very kind of you to ask. I think it's interesting when you're used to traveling all the time,
Yeah.
and then you don't travel anymore at all. It's very different.
Very
So,
different.
it's been a bit of a change. I actually, again, I think that I like to see the positive things in situations like this. So I get to spend a lot of time with my family, and I get to actually, work from my office all the time, working virtually with people. And we've always worked like this, so it's kind of fun now to work with clients like this all the time. So I think that's the positive side of it. How about Italy? How about yourself? How are you dealing with this?
But you think always in a positive way because your book, the title of your book is The Invincible Company. This book was translated, has been translated in Italian, and I think it is already in bookstores, or we can buy it through Amazon or something like that, yeah. And the concept is very strong. It is called the Invincible Company, and the fourth side of the cover of this book sounds. This handbook features the leadership toolkit decision makers, innovators, and entrepreneurs need in order to build the invincible company. Yeah. It's a very ambitious goal. Could really exist an invincible company, Alex?
So the reason we picked this title, of course, is you need to be a little bit provocative to get people intrigued, right? There are a lot of books out there. And the reason we chose the title Invincible, the Invincible Company, is because no company can be invincible. Yes. But what you can do is constantly reinvent yourself. And when you are actually obsessed by dying, you're going to reinvent yourself and you are going to become near invincible. The moment where you lean back, you get complacent, you're actually at risk of death, right? And if you take, the famous example of Jeff Bezos, you may like or not like Amazon, but they're really good at innovation. And he does say Amazon is going to die, right? It's one of the biggest companies on the planet, one of the most valuable ones. And he still says, we're going to die. That's just what happens to companies. Yes. And because that's always on his mind and on the company's mind, they created an innovation culture. So you can only stay ahead if you're always obsessed by reinventing yourself, refreshing yourself, self-disrupting, okay?
Yes, it's a series of continuously rebirth.
Yes,
we can say that. Yes, and the Italian version is Come diventare un'azienda invincibile. This is the right title for an handbook. Many advices to become an invincible company. And my first question you read, but of course, my question is, do you think that this book could be useful also for Italian companies which to be mostly small or medium-sized enterprises?
Oh yeah, size doesn't matter. This starts, at companies that have one person, 10 people, 100 people, or 100,000, or like Amazon, 800,000. It's the same principle. Yeah. You will implement it in a slightly different way, but it's exactly the same thing. So you only have to adapt the scale. But I have a lot of friend entrepreneurs, CEOs at medium-sized companies, and they say, Alex, for us, this is not a nice to have. This is a matter of survival now, right? So I think for many smaller companies, this is actually a matter of survival. And they say, yeah, but we have to focus on managing what we have. Well, my answer then is, okay, you can get more efficient on managing what you have, but you will more efficiently die. So the question is, what's more important, efficiently dying or inventing the future so you can survive and thrive 5, 10, 20 years down the road? Yes. And of course, the answer is simple, But it does mean you actually need to carve out time out of your agenda every week to work on the future. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And that's the challenge, that people need to say, oh, I need to go into uncharted territory. It's not enough to be world-class at managing. You need to be world-class in inventing the future. And here's I think, the big one.
Yes.
People confuse innovation and technology invention. So people think, oh, I need to be really good at technology to innovate. That is not true at all, right? Innovation is very simple. Creating value for customers and creating value for your company.
Yes.
Those are two things where you may use technology, but maybe not. And a beautiful example, and this is a kind of big company example again, Nintendo with the Nintendo Wii, with the console, right, with motion control. Guess what? When they launched it, it was an inferior technology compared to the competitors. So it was less good.
Yes.
Why did they win? Why did they disrupt? Because they had a value proposition for casual gamers, an underserved market. So you can win with inferior technology. Keep that in mind. Innovation is not about technology. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Innovation is always about value creation for customers or your organization. Sounds trivial, but people tend to forget that. They always think technology. Technology is just an ends to a means to an end.
Yes, yes. This book is the fourth of a series of four, and the last one before this book was testing business ideas about startup to build a startup. Do you think this is the last step? The last step to build a successful company? Is it a progressive stairway to successful businesses, or it could be read without considering the other three books?
Oh, so you can start definitely with this book. So, you know, the other books go more into details. This book gives you two things. The bigger picture of how you work as a leader on your organization, and it gives you an idea of how to work on your business model. Yes. If you want to go into details to how to test your ideas, you can go to the Testing Business Ideas book, but you don't have to read all other three books to get to this fourth one. You can actually start with the fourth one. So, you know, what we do when we write a new book, first we ask, does the world need another book?
Yeah.
The answer normally should be no, there are already many out there. And then we arrogantly say, yeah, the world needs another book. But it's for a very simple reason. We only write a book with my team, with my co-author, Yves, when we believe we can help people, business people, do a job better that they're not doing well enough yet. So if somebody else wrote a tool to work on that part, we're not going to do it again, right? So I love books like the Blue Ocean Strategy book. There's a lot out there where we don't need to reinvent the wheel. But there's a lot out there also where people just don't know what to do exactly. So we tend to write another book to give people the tools. Our books are very visual. It's not just text, not blah, blah. We try to make it practical so people can actually do the work.
Yes, yes. Could you speak about your team? You wrote this book with other three authors.
Yeah.
And who are they?
So it's actually bigger, right? So when we write a book, it's not just the co-authors. So, you know, Yves Pigneurs, Frédéric Etienne, Alan Smith. It's a whole team, right? We have people who work on content, right? We have Lucy in the background is doing all the research. We have Trish with Alan who work on the design. This is a pretty big undertaking because we make it a very visual and accessible book. So the team is always, you know, pretty big, usually 5 up to 7 people because there's so much to do. Chris, another designer. So we had 3 designers working on this particular book.
Yes, this is a visual book in a visual world. Yes, I understand. Could you explain the structure of the book? Exploration and exploitation are the basic concepts, the 2 main actions for a company to do.
Yeah, and let me actually share my screen here quickly. Let me see if I can make that work. I think so. Let's see, here we go. Give me 1 second, I'll try to share my screen. because I want to draw something. Again, you know, I'm very visual. And if we just talk, we'll be in the world of blah, 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 right? So,
yes.
So what we always say is companies are divided into two big blocks. One is I'm exploiting what I have, right? I'm managing my existing business models.
Right.
And then the other one is I explore the future. I invent new business models.
Yes.
And the reason we kind of separate these two worlds is very simple, because uncertainty is different on both ends. Uncertainty and risk is different on both ends. When we're managing, uncertainty is relatively low. I know the customers, I know the channels, I know the business model. When I'm exploring new markets, new business models, uncertainty is very high. What does that mean? I need to work in a different way. Here, it's about managing and executing, okay? Manage and execute. It's relatively linear. Here I'm in the idea world. I'm trying to figure out which ideas work. So it's more of a search process. It's not about management. It's search, and I like to call it actually entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, right? Because here we're in the world of ideas. And you need to work in a very different way on both sides. So companies of any size, it's not just for big ones, they need to manage what they have.
Yes.
They need to invent the future. Again, sounds trivial, but you need to be able to master both skills, because you know what? The skills and processes and culture on both sides are very different, right? So I like to sketch that out, because we need to remind leaders that the way you work on both sides are very different. In finding new business models, new value propositions, you can't do that with the processes of management and execution. A big thing is, when you try something new, you're going to fail a lot. So you have to make failure a good thing. People have to be comfortable with that. At most companies, you get fired when you fail. And you should in execution, but you shouldn't in innovation. And if you don't take away that fear of failure, what's going to happen is people are not going to take any risks. They're not going to explore any ideas. So it's a very unintended consequence of being world-class at execution. You actually kill exploration. So we need both. It's not one is more important than the other. We need both.
Okay. The transformation, the concept of innovation. How do you define a successful innovation? Can innovation be learned?
Yeah, oh yeah, you bet. Otherwise, we wouldn't write any books, right? So just quickly back to this, because let me also make clear, innovation as an individual word doesn't mean anything. So what you want to do is you want to split innovation in three categories. Efficiency innovation, okay? So that means making the existing business models better, okay? That's one way of innovating. Sustaining innovation, it means if I am Ferrari, I'm going to make a new model, okay, to replace the old ones. That's sustaining innovation. But now think of transformative innovation. That is when you create entire new business models. So if you look at Amazon, the transformative innovation was Amazon Web Services. It's a completely new growth area. Now here's where we need to be very clear. It's not that one of these is more important or better than the others. They're all important. But what happens is most companies can say, this, oh, we do. And sometimes they use crazy technology, blockchain, artificial intelligence. This, they do. This, they rarely do. And if you are in an industry that's going to disappear, you actually need to make sure you invest money and time into this. Most companies don't, right? So you need to first understand what types of innovation do you do today and where are you still not very good. Sounds trivial, but I like to do an exercise with executives. I ask them, put up your favorite innovations in your company, put them into those three buckets. And it turns out there's never anything in the transformative bucket. And then I tell them, okay, if you're comfortable with that, that's okay. But most CEOs and leaders, they're not even aware that they're doing crazy technology, so they think they're inventing the future. But the future is not about technology. The future is about the business model in the next 5, 10, 20 years. So companies are not really going beyond efficiency innovation. Most of the innovation today is very incremental. And that's usually, very often, not enough. Again, let me say, they will more efficiently die with a dying industry, with a dying business model. So what we try to show is, it's not so hard to go beyond. It sounds scary, but it's not so hard. And that's why we wrote another book.
But you know that many entrepreneurs are very conservative. It's very difficult to take them in an innovative way. But how to implant an innovation culture inside an organization?
Yeah. So what we like to say is, it's okay to be conservative because you want to manage risk. We all want to do that. The problem is, today it's often riskier to not consider innovation. So the risk of dying is more important when you don't innovate than the risk of innovating. And this is a big myth. So people think innovation is risky and expensive. It's actually not. And it sounds surprising. Let me tell you why, and that's how we talk about culture of innovation. And if I may quickly draw one more time here, here's what leaders need to understand. Two things. The first one is, when you have an idea, you need to accept you don't know if the idea is going to work. So guess what? Uncertainty and risk is high, right? And you need to accept that, and that's okay. But what we want to do is make progress towards building a real business. So let's say this is a €100 million business, okay? So what do you need to do? Most people would say, well, we got to write a business plan, and the business plan is going to look like this, okay? And then we're just going to build this thing. The problem is a business plan is a fantasy. Innovation is not an execution activity. We just said, we don't know if this is going to work. Uncertainty and risk is high. So if we execute an uncertain idea, we're maximizing the risk. So when entrepreneurs or business owners ask their teams to make a business plan, they're actually tell them, maximize the risk that you're going to fail. That makes no sense, right? So here's what they really need to do. They need to say, don't write a business plan. The only thing I want you to do, dear team, is I want you to decrease the risk of that being a stupid idea. I want you to decrease the risk. How do I do that? Small experiments. So let's say, first, you get out of the building, you talk to 50 customers, and you ask, is this a good idea? Something like that. And they say, no, it's a stupid idea. So you just failed, but you failed cheaply, and you just decreased the risk of building something nobody wants. Next thing, oh, I'm going to put a PDF, a document in front of people, and it's going to describe the product on paper. You know, this new service does 1, 2, 3. Oh, they say, stupid idea. You just decreased the risk more. Now I'm going to build a digital prototype, right? An iPad app or whatever. So you increase the investment, or euro, you increase the investment with the decrease of the risk. Yeah. So what's really important, and people who are not familiar with innovation, they don't get this. When you start, you make small investments, even in big ideas, because good ideas and bad ideas, they look exactly the same at the beginning. But once you know what you shouldn't do, you decrease the risk. You can increase the investment. So over time, you will invest more, but you'll only invest more when the risk is smaller. That means you have a culture of experimentation. Yes. Okay? And that is crucial. That's the first aspect. Number one, phase one, okay? An idea, we need to make small investment. But here's the other thing, and this is very difficult for most leaders. Leaders need to understand, when you love an idea in innovation, it doesn't mean it's going to work. So you need to actually accept, as a CEO, you do not know it's going to work. So what do you do? So let me give you maybe a concrete example to make it a little bit more tangible. There's a CEO who came to me of a consumer goods company, and he said, Alex, we have 10 ideas. Which one do I pick? You know business models. Tell me which idea to pick. I said, I don't know. And you don't know either. Nobody knows, because they all look the same. Good ideas and bad ideas look the same. So what I told him to do is invest a small amount of money into 10 teams. That could be, let's make it very small, 5,000 euro, okay? You give each team a 5,000 euro, each team, and you give them 3 months. And after 3 months, they have to present to you, to the CEO, the evidence that the customers have the problem, that the customers have a budget, etc. And what you'll see after 3 months, the 10 teams, and this could be a team of 1, not all of them will find that evidence. So guess what you do? After 3 months, you only give 3 to 5 teams here, you give them money. And you give the new 5 teams here, you maybe give them 25,000 euro, okay? And you give them 6 months. And you do the same thing. After 6 months, you only give the teams money here that really performed, which means you didn't pick the winning team up front. You made a funnel, okay? Now, you'll say, oh, but I'm a small company. I can't invest in 10 ideas. It doesn't matter. You could say 3 ideas before you select one. But don't make this the mistake that most CEOs who don't know innovation, they will pick their favorite idea. And only once they built the product or service, will they know, rest in peace, this was a silly idea.
Yes.
So what you really want to do is this kind of logic. And again, if we go back to this picture, and I'll stop there and pause a second, this is why exploit and explore are different. Here, you can make big investments because you know what's going to work. Here, you make small investments in several projects because to figure out one, you need to build this kind of innovation funnel. So that's the logic that we know how this works now. The problem is today, not that many leaders, and it's not just a small company problem, the big company leaders don't know either. Because most of them, they're managers, they're not entrepreneurs. So they never learned how to invest in innovation and entrepreneurship. It's not because they're not smart, it's because their entire managerial education was on execution. So we actually need a shift in the mindset of the leaders of every company everywhere on the planet, not just in Italy, in Switzerland, in the US, even in Asia, South America, everywhere, there needs to be a better understanding of how innovation works. Otherwise, we're never going to see it happen.
Yes, yes, it's a very good way to produce new ideas and new innovation. But at the origins of the innovation, there is also the R&D, the research and development, yes. And which is the ratio, in your opinion, for a virtual research and
yeah. So the problem is, again, we mix up R&D, technology, and innovation, right? R&D, research and development, is often, I'd say 90% of the cases I see, R&D helps improve the existing business model. So it doesn't help you invent the future, okay? So we need to, I like to split into two. There's technological R&D, yes. And there's business R&D. So we actually need to create an entire new practice of business R&D, which goes often hand in hand with technical R&D, but they're two different things, right? So I think if most companies, if they just took 10% of their technical R&D and they put that into business R&D, I would bet they could double their revenues and profits, because the return on R&D is going down because they don't invest in business R&D. The companies that do, and I'll give you an example of that, they grow like phenomenal. My favorite example today is actually not Amazon. It's a company called Ping An in China. It's a big insurance and banking group. And 10 years ago, the CEO, the founder, Peter Ma, he said, banking and insurance is going to die. We're going to get killed by technology companies. That's what he said. And then he said, we're going to invest 10% of profits and 1% of all of our revenues into business R&D and technical R&D together. And here's the key thing. He said, I'm not going to manage this. I'm a manager. I manage. I'm going to hire a co-CEO, Jessica Tan, a lady who is responsible for inventing the future. And her only task is not to run the business, but to build the future. And as soon as some of these things work, they get handed over to the managers, okay? So they did two things right. They invested in the future and they gave innovation power, okay? Because today, innovation has no power. If you think of anybody who's watching this, right? Ask yourself, where does innovation live in your org chart? If it's somewhere in the basement, it's gonna die. If you as the leader are not taking care of innovation, which means you don't spend 40% of your time every week on innovation, guess what? Everybody in your company is gonna say, well, the boss doesn't care. I'm not gonna go into innovation because there's no career path there. Mm-hmm. If the boss signals, this matters, everybody's gonna get on board. So one of my favorite CEOs today is Bracken Darrell. He manages Logitech. So many of you might be using Logitech cameras or mice right in the virtual space today. He spends 40 to 60% of his time on innovation. The big boss. You could say, well, how does he have time? Doesn't he have to manage the present? Well, guess what? You have a chief operating officer to manage the present. As the leader, you should be inventing the future. And that's the same for a 10-person company, for a 10,000-person company, or for a 100,000-person company. The exact same logic, obviously with different resources.
Very reasonable. The added value of your book is are the examples from big companies of all the world interviewing their CEO, failure and success, the lesson of Amazon, very interesting, or the reinventing of Fujifilm Holdings. In my opinion, this review is one strength of the book, isn't it?
Thank you that you're saying that. But we did a lot of research on the cases because we wanted to make it tangible. Yeah. But there's also a risk with cases. So we took the cases more as an illustration of what we call business model patterns. So we believe that no matter in what industry you're in, you can learn from the business model patterns from other industries, from other companies, actually more than from your own industry. So we came up with the idea of patterns. So let me give you a very simple one. Shifting from a product business to a service business, okay? Very common pattern. So the example we choose is Hilti. They make machine tools for builders. Many of us know it, right? They shifted from making machine tools for builders and selling them towards becoming a company that manages the logistics for construction companies. So the example you can't copy, but you can copy the business model patterns of shifting from product to services. That's a very, very trivial one. Let me give you another one. So and here's where I don't like dogma, because I love the examples that stand out of contrarians. So remember when Apple launched Apple stores, and they put in place what they call the geniuses, the genius bar, where you'd have people helping you. Think how revolutionary that was. The computer industry was low margin, and you never got to talk to a person who would help you because you'd feel very uncomfortable as a computer buyer. You'd say, oh, if I go ask the question, they're going to make me look stupid. Apple said, no, we're going to go from low touch, no service, to extremely high touch. We're going to have people at the Apple Genius Bar who are going to help you, and they're never going to make you look stupid. If you have no clue about iPhones, no clue about iPads, no clue about laptops, they're going to help you. That is very contrarian. When the entire world moves to automation, okay, because we don't want people, it's expensive. Apple moved from automation to people because that's the most valuable thing. So I don't like companies that copy others and follow the herd. I like companies who say, what's the right thing to do and how could we do it? So guess what? Apple said high touch, high margins, goes hand in hand. If you say automation, you're getting closer and closer to low touch, and if everybody's doing it, there's zero differentiation. So think of it this way. What's the right thing to do? What are the possibilities? Don't look at your competitors. Your competitors don't matter. What matters is value creation for customers and value creation for your business. You need to become an entrepreneur and reinvent, right? Reinvent. Or at the very least, be a fast follower of those few outliers. But what's not a good recipe is to copy everybody else, because mostly they will figure out what they're doing is actually stupid, and you're just copying the model that they're going to throw away.
Yes. Okay, and among the examples, there is the Sony Startup Accelerator program that I noticed that you like this very much, this program. And can you tell us why this program is very innovative?
So what I really like about the Sony Acceleration program is that, you know, you have to imagine that Sony is a pretty powerful, you know, company, and they should have invented the iPod, but they didn't, right? Because they didn't have this kind of culture where you could bring things together, explore, fail a lot, right? In Japanese culture, failure is not a good thing. You don't want to, you know, lose face and so on. So in that relatively difficult, I'd say, cultural context, you had a team putting things together that changed the culture. So experimentation, this lean startup method became normal, and they would be reporting directly to the CEO. So there would be really strong kind of support. It was a powerful thing, because what we often see is every company on the planet of a certain size has accelerators, hackathons, but none of that works. Why? Because we have innovation activities that we could call innovation theater. It's for the show, right? It's just, oh, it looks good. But what matters is, it doesn't have to look good, it has to make a difference. So we want to see a stop of innovation theater. I prefer less innovation activities, but more impact. And the only way you can get more impact is if you give, again, innovation power. So the Sony Accelerator, just like the Bosch program, you know, they get more power so they can change the culture. So the ideas that come out of there actually get to something. My colleague, Tendai Vicky, who works with a lot of companies as well, he likes to say that, be careful that, you know, the ideas that are homeless at the beginning, meaning no P&L, no business leader actually wants them at the beginning, once they get big, they don't want them either because they're not going to fit anywhere in the company. So what we've seen is the paradoxical thing that some projects that could make a lot of money, they get killed because they don't fit in anybody's job description. Let's say, you know, you're a food company and your team comes up with a lunchbox, but it doesn't fit into anybody's P&L because your P&L is water, your P&L is chocolate, right? So the lunchbox won't fit anywhere. So we have to make sure that innovation has power so the best ideas actually get implemented. Again, you know, it's crazy. This stuff, we see it all the time. There are few companies only that are really good at innovation. Everybody does innovation, and only few do it right.
Okay, you have already told something about that, but there are two remarks that you write in your book. The first one is they are advices. Embrace small failures or you are dead. Invest like a venture capitalist. And I think the first one is very important for the book. Yes. You already told something about it.
Yeah, and you know, just to kind of, you know, get back to that loop, just to use the same drawing again. So what I drew here, if we take this one, you know, remember this here. How do venture capitalists invest? There's this thing called seed funding where we invest small amounts of money in the beginning. And you know what? Early investors, they know that it's very likely that the idea is going to die. So when they invest, they always think, probably I'm going to lose that money. But because they made 10 investments, they know that one of these ideas is going to work, okay? So that means seed investment is small amounts of money into a large number of teams. But here's what happens at the next stage. An investor will only invest when they see evidence. And sometimes in the startup world, they call this traction. So an investor is only going to invest in a team when they say, oh, can you show me that 10 clients actually have that exact problem? Okay, good. I'm going to give you now those 25,000 euro, right? So the big one is at the beginning, small investments in many teams. And the other one is the portfolio aspect. So a venture capitalist will never invest in one project only. They're very smart, right? So we'd say, well, are they stupid? No, they're actually smart. They know they can't pick the winner. And when you can't pick the winner, you invest in a portfolio.
Yes.
Because if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects, you know that one of them is going to work. And the return in venture capital is always the same. All of the venture capitalists will tell you one project will pay for every other project. It's the same across the board. And it's even more extreme in the early stage than in the later stage, okay? So it means for leaders, if you're a leader, don't ever expect a return on investment from one project team. Because what are you going to do? You're going to say, what's the return on investment for this project? You're telling them you have to succeed. When you tell a team you have to succeed, what are they going to do? They're going to stop innovating because they're not suicidal, right? They don't want to kill their career. So as a leader, you actually ask for the return on portfolio. And all of the teams that fail, you don't punish them. You reward them. You tell them, great, try again. You can try as many times as you want because it's only because many try that one will win. So that's what we call metered funding, investing like a venture capitalist. What it does require from the leader, so take a person like Jeff Bezos. I like what he says. Again, a lot of things that maybe you don't like about Jeff Bezos, but when it comes to innovation, world class, right? He likes to say, Amazon is the best place in the world to fail. Why does he say that? Because he also says, you know, invention, innovation, and failure are inseparable twins. And he says that one winning project will pay for 1,000 failed projects. That's what I just showed you, right? So great innovation leaders, they know that you have to have many projects of which many will fail to let the winning idea emerge. You don't pick the winning idea, you create the conditions for the winning idea to emerge. The leaders that try to pick the winning idea, they often fail. Let me give you an example. Flow TV. I'm sure you never heard of Flow TV. Because Flow TV had to fire the few customers they had. So this was a device that you could watch TV on a device like this throughout the United States. It was pre-iPhone, you couldn't make a phone call, you could watch TV. The company that invested in this was a corporate venture. They lost $1.6 billion, okay, on the project. Why did this happen? Because it was the CEO's idea. And nobody tells the CEO, oh, that's your baby? Nobody tells the CEO, your baby's ugly, okay? So you cannot pick the winning idea. So as a leader, don't try to make your pet projects win. Invest in 10 teams, and maybe the idea that you hated is going to be the biggest winner. Because your only judge is not the person with the biggest business card. The only judge is the market. But you can test before you build the thing. You can test really early on. And that does require from leaders to be very humble, okay? We need to actually admit, we don't know what's going to work. Not every leader likes to say that.
Yes, this is a very strong concept in the Silicon Valley, and which ought to be imported to Italy and to very, very important. But I would like to go back to our start because you offer rules, ways, models to reduce the death and disruption risks.
Yes.
But at the very end, managing a company is also an act against the gods. You remember, against the gods. You remember the book of, I don't remember who, the author, but it was a bestseller of some years ago, Against the Gods, to calculate the risks, which is the good way to use the Invincible Company, this book.
Yeah, so, you know, when you take innovation, you know, there's a fine line, right? So let's do a jump to entrepreneurship for a second. So when we see, you know, entrepreneurs, we think, and they're making on the cover of a magazine, we say, oh, what a brilliant person. But the thing we always need to remember, and I'll quote Steve Blank, my friend Steve Blank out of Silicon Valley here, who invented the whole Lean Startup method. He likes to say, there's a fine line between vision and hallucination. And now take a person, a lot of people, you know, see Steve Jobs as the genius, right? And they'd say, oh, it was creative genius that led Steve Jobs to make the iPhone, the iPod, and so on. What they do not know is that Steve Jobs challenged his vision every single day with his design teams. So they were obsessed by failure again. They always wanted to make sure this is not a hallucination. So I think you need to have this gut feeling of the vision, but you need to have a system and process to constantly test that vision. So you actually test the small steps and you don't compromise on the vision. Great entrepreneurs, they stick with the vision, but they adapt the steps how to get there all the time. So sometimes we confuse the, oh, I have this great idea, I'm going to implement the idea. You should never go with that gut feeling because it means you're probably going to waste a lot of money. You need to have a big vision and then test how you get there. The other thing I'd say is be careful when you have a lot of money, you're at risk of building stuff nobody wants. So Vinod Costa, very famous investor out of Silicon Valley, co-founder of Sun Microsystems, he likes to say, if you give a team, startup or corporate venture, if you give a team too much money, too many resources, you decrease the success chance. Why is that? Because when you have the money, you're going to build something nobody wants because you don't have to test. I have the money. Beautiful example. And again, some of you might know it, right? Quibi. You heard of Quibi? Quibi is the equivalent of Netflix optimized for mobile phones. And it was launched just 3 months ago. Quibi raised $1.75 billion. So they had the money. The CEO is Meg Whitman, a very experienced CEO. On the board is Jeffrey Katzenberg from Hollywood. So you'd say they had everything. But the problem is they had too much money, so they built something nobody wants. So counterintuitively, when you want a big win, don't make a big bet. Because if you make a big bet, you maximize the risk of failure. That's why business plans don't work. Business plans are about making big bets that look great on paper. They look great in a spreadsheet. And they usually fail, right? So we need a completely different culture of having a vision, but before we execute that vision, we adapt, we adapt, we adapt. The hard part is never the vision or the idea. That's easy. The hard part is to turn an idea into a value proposition customers actually care about and a business model that can scale profitably. If you have that and you have the right leadership, you're going to succeed. So 3 things for success: a value proposition that customers care about, a business model that can scale, and the leadership that can gather a team around you and get towards scale.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, for the very, very interesting lesson you made for us, and we will publish it post it in the next few hours, and the Italian version in 2 days, I think, because we have to translate it and to post it on my newspaper, online newspaper. Thank you very much, and
thank you.